Paul, welcome. How are you?
Not bad at all. I've just come in off of the windswept streets of London, and it's delightful out there.
Pretty much better off in here. Much better off in here. So thanks for being on the podcast. Much appreciated. Can you give us a bit of a potted history of your career to date, leading up to what you're doing today, please?
Yeah, that's always fun. I think I would define the majority of my career, let's say 20 years of it, as a B2C client-side advertiser and media leader for big, well-known corporate brands, Microsoft, Xbox, Vodafone, Bacardi, those kind of businesses. So different categories and different verticals. But I started off as a classic kind of brand marketer, I guess, and then specialized within client-side media leadership. So planning and ops and innovation in the way that you kind of deliver effective and efficient media deployment, media investment deployment, which has been good. That was massive part of my career, and I always grounded myself in being a good, like, well-educated, wanting to self-improve marketer, I guess. And then I left Vodafone after 4 years there in a global role, which was like $1 billion across 20 markets. We led in housing and ad tech ownership for those markets. To go and consult. I wanted to kind of do something kind of entrepreneurial and back into marketing again, ultimately. So I did 5 years as a fractional CMO, never out of work, which I'm kind of count my blessings for, because I think most people need to kind of that expression of kind of building out your surface area of luck is a truth alongside of you make your own luck as well. And I kind of fortunately was pretty good at marketing, was able to flip from B2C and client side into B2B and the ad tech and media space. And then last year I launched Version as a specialist positioning business for B2B technology businesses, basically.
Why Version?
Version's part of the way I think about positioning. And we can get into this, but it's a really important part that positioning is both a marathon and a sprint. I think most people think of it as a project and a sprint, and you kind of get it done and then it's baked for however many years until you open the box again and redo your positioning. Actually, there's loads within this, but we think of positioning more like software. So it's more systemic and something on that basis that you would update and version over time. So businesses that I typically work with then just come to me at version 1. I don't tend to work with startups at like 0 to 1. I would say I work with kind of version 1 startups, anywhere between $1 million of annual revenue through to then more mature businesses, $100 million, let's say. And I'm helping them version their businesses over time. Indeed, I've kind of got a consulting model then that is part project-based. And there is that kind of go in and do the work. But a really, really important part is then the follow-on phase where I maintain a relationship with that business and help them respond to the internal and external signals that demand a versioning of your positioning over time. So think of it like software, a version, major, minor, patch, iteration on positioning. Okay. So for any business, we kind of develop version 2, and then it might be 2.1 as a competitor kind of launches a new product or feature. Yeah, exactly that. Yeah. But really important to address those as fluidly as you can in the market. There's a business called Lovable that you might know, which is like the no-code app builder, who there was a really good interview done with the head of growth there, where she says they reposition their business every 3 months now. So it was great to hear that, because it reflects the thesis that I've developed on positioning and kind of says, yep, in this AI era, which is so competitive, and with so much replication from other businesses and an intensity of competition, that you need to be on point with your positioning at all times.
Okay. So with that in mind, let's positioning then. So what is positioning? more specifically? Like you touched upon how you think about it there, but what is it, and where does it sit? Does it sit in marketing? Does it sit with the CEO? Where does it...
There's so much in this, right? So we're going to unpack this in layers, I think, is kind of the way I thought about this. I think because it's like one of the biggest problems, I think, with positioning, or that when I'm asked about that I come across is that I reckon like half of the people I get to know don't know what positioning is. So it's like a really important question, but it's also a vulnerability in my business model to a certain extent, because you've got to dramatize what positioning delivers and the value that it creates. So let's kind of get into that. It's the very simplest, I guess, kind of way I could explain it is that it's the context with which you are chosen. Like really simple. You want to be positioning is enabling you to be chosen over and above your competition. So if we go like one level down, the way that I develop positioning is that I'm developing a system for clients. So that's a really important part of assets, visual and language, mostly language in terms of like, one of the outputs would be messaging as an example, but really important to remember that positioning is not messaging. It's not about a focus on the output. It's a focus on the strategic capability and what it's doing for your business and the framing that it delivers. Then there's that contextual component. So contextually, you need to be able to demonstrate the problem that you solve, the solution and the value that you create, that value creation is differentiated versus a competitive set for a defined set of customers. And you're doing all of that in an incredibly meaningful and motivating way so that you're both understood clearly, and we'll get into kind of AI and humans as kind of people that you need to address or things that you need to address, but that you're understood and also inspired at the same time, and kind of both are equally relevant. I just put a post out today actually about like the role of the left and right side of the brain, because most people think B2B is incredibly logical and rational, and absolutely you can do so much. There's an exponential advantage in being able to zig with emotion and creativity and distinctive language and assets when everybody else is just boring and vanilla and Switzerland. I like Switzerland, by the way. It's not boring, but we know what I mean.
Yeah, indeed. So I know you don't work necessarily on positioning people, but what's the difference between positioning? Like, what can people learn? Like, everyone in this industry needs to position themselves in a certain way, right? When they're thinking about their career progression, when they're thinking about how the market sees them, how they get, what doors they can open, how often, etc. Yeah. Like there's kind of an element of positioning in that. What can people learn from how you position companies?
It's really important because, and it's funny, I've done this work for people as a coach, as a mentor. People have asked me about their careers and where they are and how do they position themselves, and they kind of got there naturally, and I didn't realize it as I focused on defining this incredible business capability. I didn't answer that kind of bit of your earlier question about marketing and business, and it really is a business capability because what you're doing is catalyzing business strategy into language and assets that then drive your go-to-market. The parallel for people is exactly the same. And like, I'm actually not a bad example of that to a certain extent. If I think about my post-Vodafone career where I was a fractional CMO, that's actually, and a fractional CMO, there's lots of us out there, fractional, whatever, is not a great position, right? Because you're kind of like, you've commoditized yourself to a certain extent. You're basically saying I'm for hire on a kind of part-time basis, and that's my strength and that's my differentiation. Need to work on, I think, positioning there. And to be honest, right, when I left Vodafone, this might get into therapy now, I kind of didn't know really what I wanted to do, but I just knew I wanted to kind of build a business. But I just did it as me. I went to market as Paul Evans, and fortunately I had a good experience behind me, a strong network, particularly in the ad tech, media, martech, and so on, and was able to kind of trade off that. And yeah, like I said earlier, kind of not out of work for that 5-year period, which was kind of fantastic. And that was enough for me at that time. And then I needed to reposition myself as I wanted to build this specialist capability of positioning engineering, which is the new version of positioning that I take to market. So I've worked hard to change and evolve what is essentially a 40-year-old capability. That was when the original book on positioning was written, like early 1980s, by two guys called Rees and Trout. And back then the world was so different. It was like it was traditional broadcast media, and it's easier to stand out and be different in that way. The fundamental principle and concept of kind of positioning in people's minds, which I think was the title of the book, still makes sense today. So the principle kind of hasn't changed, but I needed to with the business, and I needed to be seen as the practitioner. So I kind of call myself a chief positioning engineer to reflect that. I needed to be seen as different within the market now, and different from the fractional CMO that I was for that period of time. So like 2025, when I launched the business, it's been like 6, 7, 8 months now, has been a lot about kind of revisiting those credentials, that authority, and establishing myself as an expert in this space. Although I launched the business last year, through those 5 years when I was working as a fractional CMO, the majority of work that I did was positioning work. And it's what led me to want to launch Version as a business, was recognizing that positioning needed to evolve for the AI era. Kind of positioning consultants out there were doing it in a old kind of legacy way. We're thinking about it in legacy outputs, legacy processes and legacy outputs. I weren't thinking of it as a system and something that you engineer over time. So all of that kind of came into the way I present myself now, for example, on LinkedIn, which I apologize profusely to anybody where I invade their feed on a daily basis. But really, really important for me to kind of now build an audience. And my business kind of operates outside of ad tech and media now, particularly. So I'm trying to grow my personal positioning as well as my business positioning outside of my heartland, my vertical heartland. And so far so good. It's been going really, really well.
Yeah. I'd be really interested to know how when people get in touch, who they're getting in touch with, because if I think back to my own journey, launched Six Cells just over 7 years ago. And if you look at my client recommendations from the very early days, they were about Mike. Mike did this for us.
Yeah.
And then they slowly transitioned to thanks to Mike and the team at Six Cells.
Yeah.
But Six Cells took ages to come. It was still me, right? It was I was the face of it. That's very much like you are now. You're the face of it, and you've got a company brand.
Yep.
But people are thinking, well, people that know you anyway are thinking, if I need a positioning guy, it's Paul. And what's his company called again at the moment, right? but that'll come, right? I think. Yeah. Are you seeing that? Are you seeing that? Are you seeing Versions sort of standing up on its own 2 feet yet, and where people have got in touch because they found the company and didn't know you?
Yeah. It's coming, absolutely. In fact, from a period of time, so as a fractional CMO, I deliberately kind of went off LinkedIn and was deliberately silent because I just wanted to get back to work. You know, when you're in those global leadership roles and you're so distant from the coalface of genuine problems to solve. So almost I flipped over into fractional CMO work, which was just about like getting shit done for people and solving business problems, and really, really enjoyed that. I needed then to turn up the volume on myself and establish the business as a brand. And I'm doing both at the same time. So LinkedIn, as an example, is about kind of personal branding, but always doing it with a lens of the delivery of positioning is through Version, and Version represents the principles, the IP in the system. I'm a enabler or an executioner of that. And I'm not a million miles away from both extending the brand through product and tech and being able to automate a lot of what I do, as well as kind of bring in new people as well.
So you went quiet on LinkedIn when you were in that global role at Vodafone. You can't turn the clock back, obviously, but if you could, do you kind of regret that? Now you know what you've built now, do you not think that perhaps had you been more vocal then, your brand would have been building nicely in the background?
This is like therapy, Mike. It's so true. I regret. My wife always tells me that I shouldn't regret shit, but as you've asked, I'm playing catch up on building my personal brand. There's the vertical that I've worked in for the last like 15 or so years as ad tech in media, but beyond that, I genuinely believe with version and positioning engineering, I've built something which is world leading in terms of like it's genuinely a move on from the way the positioning has been done previously. So it works, and it will work and can work across different verticals and so on like that, and different businesses. So I need to be able to. And so I'm in an acceleration mode. I'm pretty impatient, I guess, with that growth, but I'm impatient because I recognize that what I didn't do during that last 5 years was continue to build. I really think people like Paul Gubbins, as an example, he doesn't need any kind of profile building or any more exposure than necessary. But he did a great job, just going back to the personal positioning bit, I hope he's okay with me kind of reflecting on this. It's all positive, Paul, I promise you. Just reflecting on kind of how he left Unruly, and he doubled down on CTV out of programmatic and made that his thing over the course of a few years, and now has landed a great job at Google in that function with that capability. And he's done that by being visible and with leadership. I think he's focused a lot on education, as an example, around CTV in building that personal brand. So I think kind of all credit to him. It's a good lesson for me, I think. Yeah. Kind of like I need to drink my own Kool-Aid, which is kind of position and out-position the competition.
We flirted with getting Paul on a number of times. It's never worked out timing-wise, but I'd love to talk to him about how much of that was deliberate and how much of it was natural.
Yeah.
Because when I was at the Telegraph back like sort of 2011, when video on demand was first launching, I was kind of head of video and mobile advertising, if you like, go to market, and it was when it was all really new. Now, I didn't do any of this, what I'm about to tell you, on purpose. I just kind of naturally did it because I love writing. I started writing blogs about mobile and video advertising. I started tweeting like a bird, and writing on LinkedIn and talking at events and stuff.
Yeah.
And I got a nickname Mike TV because I was working on Telegraph TV. My name's Mike, and so it's fairly obvious. But I kind of built a personal brand a little bit like Gubbins has done with CTV around video and mobile. It wasn't a conscious decision; it just happened. And I got promoted a few times. Or headhunted a few times, and I always say to people, I don't think I was any better than anyone else for that job. Hopefully better than some, but not probably the best for the job. But I was the most visible.
Yeah.
And exactly what you said with Gubbins is like you think CTV. Like if I needed a relaxed CTV pro, he'd come to mind straight away, right?
Yep. There's Dolly Parton's got a great quote that I use within the positioning work, which is kind of like, and for business and for people, but I think particularly people because she applies it to herself, which is like, find out what you do and then go and do it on purpose. But find out what you do best and go and do it on purpose.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what I've done over the past kind of 18 months or so. I kind of enjoyed and was fucking good at positioning and have made it my thing. And I think Paul's probably a great example of the same.
Yeah, for sure. So how do you know if you've got good positioning? So if people listening to this are thinking, I don't need Paul, I think our position is pretty good. How do you know? How do you know if it's good? Because you're in the weeds, right?
Yeah, it's great. There's a lot in this actually. Because I only work with CEOs and founders. Or what I found was the CEOs and founders are the people that hire me. And that goes back to this being a business capability rather than a marketing one. Now, I work closely with growth teams as well, product, sales, and marketing, because positioning then drives and affects that. But the CEOs and founders typically are the ones that hire, and they're typically the ones that feel the pain of weak positioning. Now, the signals of why you need to position or when you need to position are different, and some of those are positive, right? So let's say I saw a business on LinkedIn that's just completed a bit of M&A. Perfect example, a positive strategic growth example, growth-driven example of when a business needs a position. So they need to do that. But I think the pain of positioning comes really where you're seeing commercial friction, and that could be about misalignment internally. So you've got like your sales team saying one thing, marketing posting on LinkedIn about something else, your product roadmap not being tied back to your business strategy because there's not that clarity of what you're doing and why you should be chosen within the market. But also, I think one of the key commercial indicators is and then I'll flip it as to what looks good. So one of the key commercial indicators I would say to any CEO and founder out there is if you're seeing indecision or no decision within your pipeline and through your sales team, that's a massive signal of weak positioning, because we spoke about kind of emotional and rational, and one of the biggest emotions that plays out within B2B is fear, a fear of messing up, a fear of not doing the right thing, and if it's almost like fear or indecision is almost like your biggest competitor actually, and if it is a big competitor, if you're seeing that through your numbers, then that's the time to reposition, absolutely, or address your positioning within that context. Because the flip, and I heard this through, and I've seen this from my own clients as well, where I've delivered work, and if you go onto my website, you'll see case studies from people like Azerion, OneTag, Pixels, Barb, Utic. They've basically, growth becomes easy. So as I defined positioning earlier, it's this kind of context that helps you become chosen. So by implication, great positioning makes you the easy decision. And it removes any element of doubt and risk in the buyer's mind that they should be choosing you over and above anybody else, including the choice of no decision as well. And the CEO of a company called Gamma, which is another kind of AI-enabled business that is in the presentation space. They kind of produce AI, like no-code AI presentations. He says that his kind of product market fit, which is another way of thinking about positioning, is defined where half of your growth and your demand generation is inbound. So you always need a balance, and most things in life are and rather than or, right? So you'll always need a balance of inbounds and outbounds. But I think for him, as an indicator that he's known in the marketplace, Gamma as a business is known in the market, that people choose it, and they choose it without kind of that outbound influence, which outbound for people who might not know or might not be able to classify it might be kind of, cold emails or kind of, unsolicited outreach and stuff like that. Whereas inbound is where growth feels easy and effortless. It's where people are getting organically reaching out to you. Like we were talking earlier on about an example you gave about how your business was discovered and found on Reddit and somebody got in contact with you. That's a great example of outbound, where inbound, sorry, thank you, where you've created the market conditions for acceptance, for understanding, and to be chosen. So by that kind of rule, like half your growth should be basically inbound, like word of mouth and kind of organic discovery. And there's a little bit of a quantifiable answer to it. So the work with Azerion is a great example. It's one of the nicest ones because they're such a lovely company and lovely people to work with, where following the work, we quantified that internal alignment that they now had with their own teams in terms of understanding what they do as a business and almost like why people would want to work there as well. People were saying, this is great. I understand why this company is great and the value that it delivers in market. Whereas previously there was a little bit of a disconnect with that. But then the quantifiable kind of answer and evidence came through with well over like £2 million of incremental pitched revenue that came through the business off the back of new positioning. So there's a quantifiable answer, but then there's also kind of like a feeling. There's a qualitative kind of part of positioning. You know, the expression about kind of, you know, pornography when you see it. You kind of feel good positioning because that being the easy decision means you have easy growth. When if you're feeling as though you're grinding out growth, there's a founder I spoke to recently who was kind of dead chuffed with their like 17% annual growth. And I'm like, no, that's flatlining. You're grinding out growth. And I see it in his positioning as well. It's impossible to understand what value he brings versus the competitive set. And
I've got a few examples of that. I started ghostwriting for an ad tech CEO a number of years ago. His pain point to me, he said it's like tumbleweed. He said I can't get anyone to engage. I didn't get anything inbound, and I suppose I was working on his positioning, or I wasn't thinking about it. And I said I don't understand what you're talking about, and I've worked in this industry for a long time. And if I don't understand it, the likelihood that you might have even been his audience at the time. He was trying to get hold of like, you know, big brands and stuff. Yeah. And so I said just simplify it, just talk like you talk. And then it just 10x'd the number of people that were engaging, the inbound that he started getting, people like saying, oh, can you tell me about that? You know, it just changes when you can explain it in a way that people understand it. And I would say of all the clients that we work with, do you know what we do? We create content for people within companies. So we go into a company and say, right, who are your audiences? What are the core stories that you've probably already done for them? You know, the positioning, what are the core stories you need to tell those audiences? And because people pay more attention to people than brands, we then create content with those people that enables them to tell those stories to those people and then boost that content into the right audiences. And the people that get the most inbound are the people that have been able to touch upon a pain point that people are feeling right now, you know, so in their client's language, they've been able to say, does this feel like a problem to you? To go, I recognize that. And then they start getting inbound. Yeah. Those that are kind of me too and go, oh, we do some stuff. Do you want some stuff? You know, that they get very little inbound. It's much more awareness, trust, familiarity, the work that we do there rather than lead gen so I guess the position is the bit that helps the lead gen happen, the inbound.
Yeah, 100%. And it's again kind of another reflection on positioning is like if you're kind of optimizing messaging at an executional level and you haven't addressed positioning, you're kind of just wasting your time and investment. You need great positioning to drive great go-to-market, and that's where you get the big wins, which is coming true into kind of the AI search and AI deliverables and so on.
So I want to touch upon AI, but before I do, and without giving away all your secrets, what's the broad process that you go through in order to start a new sort of positioning piece of work? Do you start with your client, like so you mentioned Azerion? Do you start by understanding Azerion and then looking at the market and then bring the two things together, or do you start with the market and then work backwards? How does that work?
Is a good question, because I think going from that fractional CMO period, well, I was applying my natural and experienced kind of marketing approach to positioning. And then I did Mark Ritson's mini MBA course and saw positioning was still being defined in this. There was a kind of process there, but just wasn't kind of that great, was pretty old school. So I worked as I kind of then moved into version as a business in codifying the process and the way of developing positioning so that I could make it replicable. Because if I was ever to scale and hire somebody coming in, I'd need that person to be able to grab hold of an approach and be able to deploy it themselves as well. So my business kind of works as I mentioned earlier. If I kind of go high to kind of low and a little bit more granular, there's kind of three phases of working with companies. There's the project based, and then there's the ongoing management measurement and iteration of positioning. The project-based bit is divided into two phases, which is an audit and something that I call code. The audit phase is where you are doing a diagnostic on the client, and let's expand on that on the client piece. So we're looking basically at category, which is I always start with category because it has the widest contextual framing dimensions within it that contain almost everything else as well. So we then kind of work on understanding competitors, indirect and direct, within or adjacent to the category. We understand the customer needs that are relevant to that category and that competitive set, and then the company capabilities. So there's kind of 4 C's. So there's a little bit of a sequence there, but one of the things that makes this kind of, there's no like AI solution for positioning that's out there at the moment. Nobody's kind of developed agentic positioning, for example, because it is part science and part creative process. There's a natural osmosis that I've found to, or a synthesis that I've found to that first kind of audit part, where you might start with category, but you uncover a truth about the urgent problem to be solved, relevant to a customer set or multiple customer sets, that then leads you to go and revisit the competitive set or revisit the category that you've kind of thought and hypothesized at the start with your client that was the one. So there's a kind of iterative process of understanding and diagnostics which happen across those 4 variables, which gets you then to a bridge point in between that and then developing the positioning itself. And that bridge point is something that I call a positioning key. It's both a statement and so a kind of like a sentence, as well as an idea and an expression of an idea. So again, you've got a statement which is more rational, and an idea which is kind of more emotional and creative, and the two work together as a springboard into a directional springboard into generating the positioning code. And those positioning code assets that I mentioned earlier are things like a go-to-market pitch statement, business description, can be taglines, mission vision, a whole host of deployable assets, which it comes back to the operating system of positioning, that are then coordinated and deployed and are doing different jobs for the company. And so you or me, I guide the business in the deployment of those assets across website, best practice pitch deck, the homepage, social assets, and so on like that. So that then they can drive that through their go-to-market, the way that they've aligned and educated their teams on understanding the positioning as well. And so they've brought sales, marketing, and product together. Everybody understands it. Everybody's deploying it differently in the way that they need to, but it comes from the same place.
Yeah, cool. And historically, this would have been all of this work that you're doing would have been for a human audience, but there's a human audience and an AI audience now, isn't there?
It's a fascinating space.
So we spoke about this, and I know you posted about this on LinkedIn as well recently.
Yeah.
2 of the top cited sites by LLMs when they're looking for answers are LinkedIn and Reddit. Reddit and LinkedIn in that order.
Yeah.
And I think.
And quite a big long tail as well, which is interesting. It says you kind of need to be present in multiple spaces, not just where it used to be was page 1 of Google and you're done.
Yeah. So how does positioning work in this sort of no-click search future where people are asking their ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever a question, and then they're getting an answer directly from the LLM, and sometimes never going any further than that? How important is positioning, and how does it play? Does it play differently, or is it just more of the same?
Yeah, you've probably seen this then, as I know you've kind of written about it as well, that this definition of AI enabled discovery or AI search. There's multiple acronyms out there, isn't there, at the moment? The one I go with is generative engine optimization, right? So GEO. But regardless of definition or acronym, what
I prefer answer engine optimization, AEO, because it's answers, right? It's answers.
Yeah.
You're asking a question, it's giving you answers.
Yeah.
They both work, but I don't know. Most people seem to be going with your one, but I prefer the answer.
I think what you need is consensus around what the acronym kind of means and what the implications are of that, because it is this huge shift from what SEO is going to be around for ages anyway, right? So, but that kind of hacking and gaming and kind of black hat techniques of backlinks and keywords, that's kind of fine for Google's page one rank, or as it was anyway, because we now know kind of page one looks very different on Google now with kind of AI answers. And I think there was a search. Yeah, exactly. There was, I think, a Search Engine Land article recently, which kind of saying a third of consumers are using or preferring to see an AI generated response, like in that top bit of real estate, which is it's so valuable, isn't it? So I guess where I get back to on GEO or AEO, okay, we'll go with that. Is so fundamentally thinking about positioning within that mix. So there are experts within this GEO space that are recognizing that if you don't have your positioning right, you're just optimizing like in the wrong way at the other end. You can get as many citations as you want, but if it's not about addressing the problem or surfacing the value that you create, then you're not going to be surfaced in against the right customer and for the right customer need. So positioning, as with everything, because it's a strategic discipline, but particularly within this world of kind of AI discovery, is critical. And it's critical because where and how you deploy through, let's say, digital PR or other forms of content marketing, they need to be surfaced with clear language. So it's not about individual keywords anymore. It's more about
answering questions.
Yeah,
it's Q&A format.
It's about that clarity of context as to why you should be chosen. Within that, the composition of the language needs to be clear, no fluff. It can't be about that kind of one word anymore. It has to be more about a composition and an asset composition. So let's say, I've done the positioning on X brands, and that flows through into a positioning asset. Let's say the GTM pitch statement. You'd want that to be used within, let's say, a press release or a Reddit contribution. And where it's used, because where I'm developing the code positioning assets, I'm doing that through a lens of obviously kind of competitive differentiation. So it needs to hold true to all of those principles of positioning, right? It needs to show that it's different, or that the client and the company is different in the context of its competitive set. There's a problem being solved and value being created. But the way that asset is composed is sense checked almost with LLMs, different LLMs, to make sure that it is comprehensible and understood by them, so that when it is used within an executional level within a press release or content marketing, that the LLM will read it in that way and will surface it against the right kind of questions that are driving discovery now.
Yeah. And I think another thing that's important with that as well, which maybe smaller companies have got a bit of a benefit around, I don't know, that's just a perception, it might be wrong, but I think natural language in your positioning copy is really important as well. How do people talk?
Yeah.
Because if AI is looking for the answer to a question that somebody's actually asked in their own words,
100%.
Does it sound like you've answered it as a human, or do you sound like a corporate machine? You know?
It's important still to use distinctive language, because humans are going to see this as well. But you want that language to be plain and simple, and in a sense of it being comprehensible and understood as well by both machines and humans. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I think that's another podcast. You'll have to come back on because I think that's a podcast in its own right.
Let's do it.
The whole AEO/GEO. The other reason I don't like GEO, by the way, is it's short for geo, which means geography. It's like we got enough acronyms in this industry. Don't have two for the meaning to completely different things. But anyway, Paul, thank you so much for being on the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm glad we managed to get it in the end.
Over already. I can't believe it.
I know it. Time flies when you're having fun, as they say. And thank you for your for those that can't see. Thank you for bringing your orange brands to our orange brand. I feel very at home with you here. Nice one, mate. Cheers.
No worries at all.
All the best.
Thanks.